let me set the stage. It's the mid-1800s, period of savagery, barbarity, and all sorts of criminality. And amidst this, there was a horse. It's a pretty average horse. You know, it does horse things, neighs, grazes, prances, trots, all of that, all of those horse proclivities. But the horse itself is of a deep, deep black, like a midnight horse, a very, very dark, mystical figure. And for one reason or another, the horse is in the Mojave Desert. It's trotting along. And for one reason or another, it is dead set on going to this small town. This is a small town of maybe 50 people, nothing too crazy. You got your general store, you got a saloon, which will be the focal point of this story. You have the blacksmith, you got the sheriff, and by extension of the sheriff, you got the jail, and you also got the mortician. So this is a pretty functional town. They got a well too, which is awesome. There's not a lot of meteorological events pertaining to water in the Mojave. It's a very dry and arid climate. And so for one reason or another, this horse is heading in the direction of this town across many, many moons, many scorching days. And throughout his journey, the horse grows famished, dehydrated even. And despite all of these compounding factors, the horse is still dead set on going to this town. A couple more nights pass. The horse is growing weak, very tired. And by divine chance alone, this horse stumbles upon a gigantic field of prairie grass, despite the fact that it is not rained in months. This grass is healthy. This grass is lush. This grass is fertile. This land that it's, the earth that it is sprouting from is very fertile land. This is some healthy, thick grass. It's got to be around 3 acres. The horse is thinking, man, jackpot. And it just starts going to town, absolutely decimating this entire field of wild grass. And he gets through the first acre and he's like, man, I wish I had something to wash this down with. I'm a horse. I get thirsty. And there's no need. Despite the irony of this, there is no need for an external party to lead this horse to water. It is determined to quench its thirst. So after mowing down and decimating this sanctuary of grass, by some stroke of luck, it happens to find a oasis in this desert hellhole. Horse also thinks, jackpot, starts just absolutely guzzling down this body of water. In about, 12 minutes or so of constantly drinking, the entire oasis is a mere crater in this desert landscape. And so the horse, not having any refreshments to accompany his meal, he decides to decimate the other 2 acres in spite of the fact that he has no beverage to accompany his meal. And by the time he's finished, the ground is no different than the terrain he has trotted upon for the past countless days. Now the horse has no purpose of being there, and therefore resumes his trek to the aforementioned town. Many more moons pass, and he eventually draws closer and closer to this town. And it's not an abnormally hot day when this steed struts into town. It's a pretty average day, but it's a curious sight to the townsfolk. Why is there this horse in our town? Was he perhaps, part of cavalry? Was he part of the U.S. military? Was he the accomplice of an outlaw? Or is this a free-spirited horse? These are many questions that the townsfolk are pontificating over as this magnificent horse is walking through town, both on a now empty stomach and a need and a need for release. I'll leave it at that. Okay. So the horse continues strutting through the town. Now, I failed to mention that the layout of this town is akin to a Midwestern strip mall, although the buildings themselves are not in such close proximity or in a uniform building as we would otherwise see in modern architecture. They are separate buildings, however, they are separated by about 3 feet of space, give or take. And it's essentially building, even though there are only about, a handful of buildings in this town. At the end of this town, and in the center of it, considering that the buildings themselves are here, the saloon is positioned here. And so the horse, for one reason or another, we will never know, decides that upon its linear path, it will enter this establishment. It will enter this saloon. Now, it's about midday. There's a fair bit of patrons in this restaurant. Families, they're getting a bite to eat. The town drunkard is there. The sheriff is enjoying his lunch break. As I said, it's about midday when this steed decides to enter this saloon. And so upon the horse's entry, the barkeep, among similar thoughts resonating amongst the patrons, is very perplexed as to why there is a single horse devoid of a rider and devoid of a saddle has entered this saloon. And so after processing this and registering this, the barkeep thinks of an absolutely absurd question, fundamentally absurd question. First and foremost, why is this horse here? But number two, is this horse thirsty? And after pondering this for a few moments, he decides to ask this horse a question. What do you want to drink? The barkeep asks. Now, if you know anything about animals in general, and if you haven't watched the Dr. Dolittle film, I'd say you're missing out. But the average person cannot speak to animals for one reason or another. Either the human lacks the proper dialect to speak to animals, or more scientifically, animals do not have language receptors that would otherwise be commonplace in Homo sapiens. And so After the barkeep asks this horse, what do you want to drink? The horse is unable to register this question. The horse is standing about halfway through the doorway. About half of its torso is in this doorway, and its posterior is currently outside. And after a couple moments, the horse steps inside a little bit more, looks around. The patrons are now silent. They are observing this abnormal phenomena of this free-spirited horse that has now entered a bar or a saloon or a otherwise drinking establishment. Okay, so the horse has now fully entered this establishment. And as I mentioned before, the horse has no concept of the English lexicon whatsoever. Question flies literally in one ear, out the other. If it even entered the ears in the first place, perhaps even the question simply drifted over the horse's head. Now, as I mentioned before, the horse has had quite a feast. It's no longer satisfied by its meal. It's now fully passed through the digestive tract of the horse. A bountiful feast has passed through the horse's intestines. And the horse, really taking no notice through the days following his grazing, took no notice to the sudden urge to evacuate his bowels. And upon this neurological impulse, this desire to defecate, the horse also is struck by a need to urinate. Naturally so. It has consumed countless gallons of water. It is drained an entire body of water in the middle of the desert, which has undoubtedly contributed to habitat loss and likely the deaths of future travelers at the hands of this horse. Unbeknownst to the horse has no concept of the severity and the implications of his actions. He was simply satisfying his urge to feed and to consume. And so by the time these neurological impulses reach the horse's brain, whatever part of the horse's brain that is, I'm no neurologist, I really have no idea. The horse suddenly and uncontrollably unleashes a foul stream of both solid and liquid feces upon the pristine floor of this establishment. I failed to mention, prior to the horse's entry, I failed to properly set the scene here, folks. This saloon had a very clean and very pristine hardwood floor, all right? The barkeep himself, over the period of weeks, maybe even a month, not only constructed this hardwood floor, sanded the hardwood floor, and applied a crude varnish to further enhance the experience of his establishment. And the barkeep and patrons are watching in absolute horror as this animal is unleashing feces upon this floor. And the sheer quantity of the bowel fluids and solids are just absolutely spewed upon this floor and upon the entryway of this establishment. With the horse has no regard for the future patrons. And not only that, the horse has no regard for the patrons currently in the restaurant who, contrary to modern fire code, only have one means of entry and exit into this saloon. So the horse is unleashing this abhorrent stream of of bodily fluids and solids. And the horse, after maybe about 3 minutes of this onslaught, the customers are in shock. The sheriff is a ghostly white. The saloon owner has fainted. He is swooned. He is behind the counter. I don't know when he's going to get up. And the children of the families that are in there are laughing out loud because not much goes on inside this small town, and a horse has just defecated all over the floor of this establishment. It is truly, truly absurd. And upon finishing this demonic expulsion, the horse does a trot, it trots about, it turns around, and it leaves, forever scarring the small, tight-knit community of this town. And after this, not much is known about this horse. Nobody knows where this horse is. Nobody knows where this horse went. It just continued upon its merry way. And so that concludes my story. I would say that it's a very deep story. It has a lot of socioeconomic implications. And I will allow you as the viewer to think through this utterly absurd scenario. Thank you for your time.